Dementia unit stress is caused by disturbing behaviour of other dementia residents and also the noise of the medical routine. There's a lot of noise in a dementia unit and it is stressful. There's the medication trolleys, the constant noise of the telephone, queries at the front desk, the kitchen clatter from meals getting prepared, etc., etc. So it needs to be considered that dementia residents are sitting amidst this, and it does cause stress, but respite from that goes a long way for them to be able to manage this. Respite in the way of visits. So if you come into the dementia unit and you yourself find it to be very noisy and loud and disturbing, then chances are the dementia resident will as well. So at that time, take them to the second lounge, or if it's a sunny day, out onto the veranda, or to their bedroom, so they can get that respite, that much needed respite. It's very important. I mean, it's not noisy all the time in a dementia unit. Sometimes, not often, it is quiet mid-afternoon when there's the changeover of staff. It's quiet, but most of the time there's a fair amount of noise in a dementia unit, and from time to time the noise does escalate with disturbing residents especially, and behavioural issues. So if the person doesn't get that respite and they're sitting in that environment all day, you can imagine what that does to your sympathetic nervous system and the fight-flight stress response. It's just like you're on stress alert all the time. I mean, dementia residents are actually remarkably tolerant and remarkable in the way they manage, but everyone has a limit. And if we can get respite from that high stress situation, it goes a long way for us to be able to manage it long term. Now, in terms of giving respite to dementia residents, for active residents, especially if the resident or the person has just come into the dementia facility, it's really important that they can have respite from the unit and have that opportunity daily, if possible, to get a walk outside. So important, especially if the person is younger, fit, active, strong, and they've just come into the unit and they haven't settled at all. It's so important for them to get a daily walk outside, for them to be able to manage at all. In fact, for all those residents that are fit and active, they need a walk outside every day, really. I mean, few get it, I have to say, unfortunately. That's one of the sadnesses of dementia units, their restriction. But really, if they can get that walk outside, sometimes in dementia facilities, there will be a husband who lives in the retirement village. That's always an ideal situation. And if the wife is in the dementia unit, and if he's living just, a couple of 100 metres away in a unit, then he can come and take his wife for a walk every day. That's ideal. I mean, some people, of course, elderly people have transport problems. Maybe they can't drive as well as they used to, etc. But if the person's younger and their relatives are younger, if at all it can be organised for daily walks, if not in the week, at least in the weekends on Saturday and Sunday, because being able to walk, being able to exercise outside with the fresh air, it really does settle that stress down and gets the endorphins going, etc. I mean, with visiting a relative in a dementia unit, yes, it's important for family connections, for, conversation, for warmth, for camaraderie, for the love of family, etc. But really it's a respite. It's an opportunity for the person to get respite from their environment, their stressful environment. That's what needs to be considered. So whatever you can do to give a quality visit to your relative in a dementia unit that gives them respite from the experience they're exposed to, the better, especially at the beginning, because it takes a lot of adjustment coming into a dementia unit. Once the person has adjusted, and remarkably that happens, especially when they've made a friend, that's when the adjustment happens much more quickly. If the dementia resident has made a friend and they sit in the lounge with them during the day and they join in the activities and they get to know everyone else in the group and they're part of the community, that's fine, that's great, that's the aim of it. So they'll need less respite then because they've adjusted and assimilated into the community. I mean, it's still important for them to have nice outings and get breaks and have visits, but it's during that adjustment phase, especially at the beginning, that these quality visits are needed and that they get respite from their environment to be able to manage. I mean, we all need respite from stress, and especially dementia residents, because they're elderly, because they've got their inner turmoil with dementia stress, memory loss and dementia blanks to cope with. So at an elderly age, you know, in their 80s and 90s, to then have to cope with all this stress in a dementia unit when they've been living alone for 10, 20 years with complete silence most of the time, except maybe the radio on soft often, and then they're in a dementia unit having to cope with everything that goes on there. It's a massive adjustment. And sometimes as a relative you may not realize this is going on because you just come in, you know, for the 20 minutes and then leave, and if at that time it's not disturbing and it's fairly settled, you won't notice. But if you sit there all day for 8 hours, you will notice. And so that's why it's good to be able to come and visit, sometimes at least a few occasions for 2 hours. Make it a good long visit. If you stay for 2 or 3 hours for a good long visit, you will get to see the routine of the unit and what goes on a regular basis, which is actually really helpful for you to be able to realize what it is that your say mother needs in terms of support, encouragement, respite, to be able to manage the routine. And some people have more resilience than others. I mean, if the person has been a school teacher and worked in a noisy classroom all their life, a noisy environment doesn't disturb them as much as if you've been a farmer's wife and you've lived on the farm all your life, and 20 years of that, the last 20 years, it's been very quiet. Then it's a massive adjustment. Or if you've lived in the army barracks, and you're used to the routine, you're used to the noise, you're used to the action, it's sort of familiar to you, then the routine of a dementia unit will be easier. So take into consideration the background of your mother, your father, who's in the dementia unit, and their ability to manage, and the stresses they're facing and how you can help. So observing what the stresses are, and you can then assimilate and recognize what it is chances are that your parent is having to work through, what they're having to work through, and then come up with ways to be able to combat that so that their stress can settle. I mean, even if you help the stress level reduce 20-30%, it's still a big help. Everything helps, every percent helps, especially if the person's stress level is really picking up to high and you can see their stress levels increasing. That's when you really need to come in with more effort, more visits, more walks outside, more respite visits, trying to get them away from their environment, encouraging them to rest in their room, taking them out for walks, etc. So they get that chance to settle their stress levels enough to be able to manage for the long term, which of course it is. It's a long time. Some of these people live in dementia facilities, so we have to try and get their stress levels, down to manage. So I've written these 2 books, The Resident's Voice and The Resident's Rise, both from a dementia unit, on ways to reduce dementia stress. They're on Amazon, they're on my website, description below. They're soft copy, hard copy. The ebooks are selling well and very popular. So those of you that like reading especially, there's lots of good quality, well-written information in there. So thank you for your looks and your likes and your subscriptions, and please subscribe and pass on these links. Thank you.